Okay. So, have you ever actually pictured the world as this giant flip book?
Yeah.
Where everything just jumps from one still image to the next, no smooth motion, just kind of like a slideshow.
Wow.
That's the reality for people with akinetopsia,
Yeah.
which you might know as motion blindness.
Right.
And in this deep dive, we are going way beyond the basics here.
Yeah.
We're going to try to uncover the mysteries of akinetopsia.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one for sure.
Really explore the science inside the brain that makes motion perception even possible.
Right.
And discover how people adapt to a life without, visual fluidity.
It's incredible, some of the adaptations.
So get ready for some seriously fascinating brain stuff, because this is a deep dive into a world you may have never even imagined.
Yeah. And what's really wild about this condition is that akinetopsia, it's not that your eyes themselves are malfunctioning.
Okay.
It's actually a neurological condition.
Gotcha.
So the disruption is happening within the brain's wiring,
Okay.
specifically in the area that's responsible for processing how we see movement.
So even if you have perfectly healthy eyes, your brain just can't weave those individual images together into a continuous flow.
You got it. It's like, when you're watching a movie and you have a really bad internet connection,
Yeah.
so it's buffering and freezing and you're missing these chunks of action.
Right.
It's kind of like that. And there are varying degrees of akinetopsia.
Okay.
Can range from like a strobe light effect, we call that inconspicuous akinetopsia.
Okay.
That's where the motion is really jerky. To the more severe form, which is gross akinetopsia, which is like a near total inability to perceive motion at all.
Okay, now my brain needs a little bit of help grasping that. So let's say, you're pouring a cup of coffee. Someone with severe akinetopsia wouldn't see, a smooth pour, right?
Not at all.
Okay.
Think of it like this. They see you tilt the pot, and then suddenly, boom, the cup is full.
Wow.
They miss that actual liquid cascading down.
Yeah.
It would be like looking at a photograph of each stage of the pour instead of the action itself.
That's so bizarre. It's really hard to even
It's
picture.
a trip.
But it makes total sense why everyday activities would become so challenging.
Right.
But before we get into that, let's dive into the brain itself.
Okay.
What's actually malfunctioning to cause this?
So it all comes down to a specific area of the brain
Okay.
called, and this is a mouthful, V5MT.
Okay.
You can think of this area like the conductor in an orchestra.
Okay.
So it's receiving all these signals from the eyes. Those are all your individual musicians.
Right.
And it's V5MT's job to synchronize those signals into this smooth and cohesive experience of motion. When this region is damaged, it's like the orchestra falls apart.
Okay, damaged V5MT, got it. But what could actually inflict that kind of damage? Are we talking about head injuries, or is this something else entirely?
Honestly, it can be a whole range of things. Strokes, brain lesions, even traumatic brain injuries can throw a wrench into the delicate workings of V5MT, leading to akinetopsia.
So there's no single villain in this story, which makes sense considering akinetopsia is so rare.
Exactly. And one of the most mind-blowing things we've learned about this area of the brain comes from a procedure called transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Okay.
Or TMS for short.
AMS. Okay.
Basically, researchers can temporarily silence specific brain areas with magnetic pulses,
Really?
including, you guessed it, V5MT.
Wait, are you saying we can temporarily give someone akinetopsia through TMS?
Yes,
That's wild.
it is. And get this, in one study, they used TMS on participants while showing them these moving dots on a screen.
Okay.
So with their V5MT temporarily offline, the participants could no longer tell which direction the dots were moving in.
Wow.
But here's the kicker. They could still accurately guess the direction the dots would have moved if the dots had continued on their trajectory.
Whoa, so their brains were still somehow predicting motion even though they couldn't actually see it happening?
It seems that way, yeah.
That's incredible. What does that tell us?
Well, it really highlights just how complex and nuanced the brain is. It suggests that our brains might be processing motion information on multiple levels, even without us consciously being aware of it.
Okay, that is seriously blowing my mind. So even when we turn off V5/MT, there's still some deeper processing of motion happening somewhere in there.
Right.
That's both fascinating and a little creepy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what else is going on beneath the surface of our awareness? But to circle back, this research with TMS is actually incredibly promising.
Okay.
And not just for understanding how the brain works, but also for potential treatments down the line.
So there's hope that maybe someday we could reboot a malfunctioning V5MT.
Potentially, yeah.
That's amazing. But I imagine for people living with akinetopsia right now, those breakthroughs can't come soon enough. And we've kind of touched on this, how everyday life is so challenging. But can you paint a clearer picture for us? Like, what are some of the biggest hurdles?
Well, just imagine trying to, let's say, cross a busy street when you can't judge the speed of oncoming cars,
Right.
or trying to catch a ball thrown your way.
Huh.
You can't follow its trajectory.
Right.
These simple acts become incredibly dangerous, sometimes even impossible.
It makes you realize how much we really do take those visual cues for granted.
We do.
It's not just about, enjoying a scenic view. It's about like navigating a world that's constantly in motion.
Absolutely, and it goes even deeper than that. Think about social interactions.
Okay.
We rely so heavily on, those subtle nonverbal cues like a raised eyebrow or a nod.
Right, or even just like a slight shift in body language. Those
Exactly.
micro expressions, they tell us so much.
They do.
And we don't even realize it a lot of the time.
Exactly. But for someone with Akinetopsia, all of those cues are totally lost in translation.
Yeah.
So it becomes incredibly difficult to interpret certain social situations, to connect with others on that intuitive level, even just to follow a conversation naturally.
Because if someone's lips aren't moving smoothly, to your brain, it would be really hard to even like concentrate on the words that they're saying.
Precisely, yeah. Akinetopsia can be incredibly isolating, both physically and emotionally. It affects nearly every single aspect of a person's life, from the mundane to the profound.
It's kind of heartbreaking to think about. So, with challenges this significant, what kind of help is available? Like, are there effective treatments, or are we talking about more just like learning to cope?
Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet cure for Akinetopsia, at least not yet.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there's no hope.
Mm.
A lot of the focus is on managing the symptoms
Okay.
and empowering individuals to adapt to their unique way of seeing the world.
So, how does that actually work? Like, what are some of those adaptations?
Well, one approach is to help individuals kind of tap into their other senses,
Okay.
especially hearing and touch,
Okay.
to compensate for the missing visual information.
So, like using audio cues to navigate their surroundings,
Mm.
or relying on tactile feedback when they're like pouring liquids or handling objects.
Yes, exactly.
So it's about retraining the brain to rely on like a different set of inputs. What about therapies that are designed to kind of directly address the visual processing issues? Is that even possible?
It is. There's actually ongoing research into something called vestibular and visual rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So essentially, these therapies aim to kind of fine-tune a person's balance, their coordination, and their visual processing skills.
It's amazing to think like we can actually retrain those visual pathways
Yeah.
to some degree at least. It really speaks to like the incredible plasticity of the brain,
It really is, yeah.
even when it's faced with such a unique challenge.
Absolutely. And, beyond these therapies, one of the most powerful tools is something, honestly, really simple. And that's raising awareness.
Right.
The more people that understand Akinetopsia, the more support those who live with it will receive.
Absolutely, because even if we can't like, fully fix it, just having that understanding and empathy can make a world of difference.
Huge.
This whole conversation has got me thinking.
Yeah.
If someone, who had always seen the world with like normal motion perception,
Right.
if they suddenly experienced Akinetopsia, even temporarily,
Yeah.
what aspects of motion do you think they would like appreciate the most once it returned?
Oh, that's such a good question. Personally, I think they would find a new appreciation for even the most ordinary examples of motion.
Okay.
Like the way leaves flutter in the breeze,
Yeah.
the smooth arc of a child on a swing set, even just like the gentle rise and fall of someone's chest as they breathe. These subtle yet constant movements that, we often take for granted. I think those would become really extraordinary.
That's a really good point. And it's like you were saying earlier, we don't always realize what our brain is doing for us until something goes off script.
Exactly, yeah.
This deep dive into Akinetopsia has really like opened my eyes.
Mine too. It's just a powerful reminder of how complex and incredible our brains are and how much we still don't know about this thing, the mysteries of perception.
Well said. For our listeners who want to kind of explore Akinetopsia further, trust me, there's a lot more to discover. We'll link some resources in the show notes.
Please do.
And until next time, keep those brains engaged because the world is full of fascinating deep dives just waiting to be explored.